Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of VitalityOET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you start experiencing so many changes in this time of your life, whether it be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, or that waking around the middle that seems to come out of absolutely nowhere despite you not changing anything. So you go back to your tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet nothing seems to be working. In fact, you're putting in all this effort and it feels like you're moving backwards. But we know now that your body is inherently different now that you've gone through these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to really help you understand how your body changes in this time of your life so you can reach those health and fitness goals, live a life full of vitality, and really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today, what I want to talk about is protein. You hear it everywhere. You need more protein. You need to have more protein to lose weight. But does that amount change in menopause? Like, why is it really important in menopause? How much do you actually need? Why do you need it? So I'm going to dive into all of these things. I do have a sample meal plan, 3 days, that show easy ways to get 100 grams of protein in your day. There is a link for that in the show notes, or you can always message me and I can send that over to you as well, just to show you that you can do it, because we get very overwhelmed when it comes to having to eat more protein, right? It feels like we can never do it. It's a struggle. So I want to provide you with some resources to show you how you can actually achieve those numbers and actually not be that high calorie either. So it is possible. You can do it. So I want to dive right into this topic. Why do you need to ensure that you are getting enough protein in perimenopause and the years that follow? Well, I have a nice long list for you, so let's tackle it. Number 1 is blood sugar control and energy. So this one's huge. This is something that we hear a lot of women complain about when they're going through perimenopause and the years that follow, that, their energy starts to decrease and they're exhausted, right? They're struggling with that, those energy crashes that happen in the afternoon. And we also see that, they don't feel like they've changed anything to their diet, and all of a sudden, their doctor tells them they're pre-diabetic. They're like, what the heck? I didn't change anything. But there's things inside of your body that are changing. And you guessed it, we're talking about hormones here. So this is because estrogen starts to go down, right? We know that as we go through perimenopause and menopause, we pass that reproductive prime. Our follicles start to die off and weaken, and estrogen production starts to decrease. This is supposed to happen, right? But what happens is we go into perimenopause and menopause into this very stressed state, and we can see really aggressive drops in estrogen, which then makes us more insulin resistant. So our body doesn't respond to insulin as well. So what does that mean? So I like to use the Uber driver analogy. I've used this a few times and I feel like it makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense to me and not to you, but hopefully this makes sense. But basically what happens is sugar gets put into your bloodstream either from not eating enough carbs or being in a high stress state or fasting. Your body breaks down muscle, takes it to your liver, turns it to sugar and dumps it into your bloodstream. Or we see our blood sugars increase from the foods that we're eating. Okay. So what happens when our blood sugars go up is our brain's like, hey, we need to put this sugar somewhere. It's not good for our blood sugars to remain elevated. So then our body calls Uber. The Uber Eats guy. Hey, we have some meals that need to be delivered to places in our body. So then insulin is like the Uber Eats driver. They go, they pick up the sugar molecules, the glucose molecules, and then they take them to your cells. Okay, so the Uber driver then knocks on the door. You open the door of the cell, and then the cell receives the glucose, that sugar, to bring that blood sugar down in your bloodstream. And then we close the door. But what happens is when our estrogen goes down, we're not as good as regulating our blood sugar and our cells become more insulin resistant. So what this means is our body doesn't quite listen to the knocking of the Uber driver on our door. So what happens is the delivery person is knocking on the door, and nothing's happening. So then we need more insulin. And he's like, hey, I think this person's like asleep. Can you help me get them to wake up. So then they call their buddies and more of them are knocking on the door until finally that cell door opens. So your body's becoming more resistant to the signal of insulin to shuttle those sugars into your muscle cells and things like that. Now, what can happen is because our cells become more resistant, our Uber Eats driver's like, okay, I got to deliver this food somewhere. So it actually takes it to fat cells, which we don't want, right? So this is where we start to see a lot of the struggles, and we have issues with blood sugar spikes and blood sugar drops then, right? And this is going to lead to more energy crashes. So that afternoon drop, or we start having more cravings, because what happens is we see that our blood sugar spikes, insulin comes in, we get a lot of it, and then it drops, and then we have a blood sugar drop. Then we have the energy crash and the cravings, and then you have something else that's really sugary, like the chips or the chocolate, right? So where does protein fit into all of this? Because that's important to understand. So what we see is protein breaks down more slowly. So we're not going to see as big of a spike in our blood sugars or a drop. It's going to increase slowly and then kind of maintain and then drop down slowly, which is great. That's what you want. We don't want these big spikes and drops in our blood sugar. So what happens is that helps your overall insulin resistance, because we don't have as much insulin needed to shuttle those sugars in, because we're not having this massive spike and needing a bunch of it to help shuttle it into our cells anymore. We also see that because protein breaks down more slowly, we're not having those energy crashes. Our energy is more sustainable throughout the day. And we're also going to see that we're having less cravings. It keeps us full longer. So this is where protein plays a huge role in being able to regulate your blood sugars and your energy, which is a huge issue during perimenopause and menopause when we see those estrogen levels come down. So we want to make sure that when we are eating, we want to pair our proteins with your carbs. So you never want to be having carbs by itself. You want to pair it with protein. You want to pair it with some fats. This is like where order of eating can be really helpful as well. So making sure that we're having our, eating most of our protein and veggies first before dipping into our carbs. And that really, really helps with that blood sugar control and that energy. So protein is huge, plays a huge, huge role in this. So protein at every meal, very, very important. If you can, try and eat a good chunk of your protein first before dipping into those carbs. So that is the importance of protein, number one. Number two, it helps keep you full longer. So like I just touched on, this ties in with what we talked about with blood sugar here. So what we're seeing is because protein breaks down more slowly, it keeps you full longer. Our stomach actually empties slower. So that's going to help you with your cravings and your snacking throughout the day, because you are full for a longer period of time, which is obviously going to help with like consistency in your calorie intake. Because if we're not reaching for those sugary snacks and the chips and the chocolate and the donuts and all those things, it's easier to keep our calorie intake in a closer range, instead of seeing like 2,500 one day, 1,800 the next, or 1,300 and then 1,600 and then 1,200. Like, we want to stay within like a 200 calorie range if you're able, because that reduces stress on your body, which is also great for blood sugars, but for your weight as well. So why does this matter so much in menopause? Well, when estrogen goes down, that lovely drama queen, right? We find that food tends to be less satisfying. We naturally have higher hunger as well. So that can make controlling those cravings even more challenging. So protein really helps with that in another way, because we find that like we'll have that thing that we're craving, then it doesn't really hit the spot, and we're like, I feel like I need something else. This can be from that drop in estrogen that we're seeing. So we really have to work with our bodies, and protein really, really helps with keeping us full longer and curbing those cravings, which is obviously going to make it a lot easier for you to stay on track, make better food choices, and stuff like that. Number three, supports sleep. Let's face it, sleep tends to be a huge issue in this time of our lives. And when we don't get enough sleep, not only are we cranky and irritable and we snap a little bit more than we should, we start seeing that we struggle with a lot more than just our mood. So poor sleep means that we're going to have higher cortisol levels throughout your day. When cortisol levels are high, that stress hormone, we're going to have poor hormone production. So we're going to see that estrogen starts taking a hit. So this is where we see more blood sugar issues like we just talked about, more cravings, poor energy, which again is going to have us reaching for those highly processed food choices like the donuts and the chips, right? And then if we're pairing that with fasting or we're skipping meals, it really is a recipe for disaster for after work binges. You know, it's like, oh, I was so good all day and I get home and then boom, all of a sudden it's just like, I have no control. I'm eating everything in my pantry, or I'm cooking, and then by the time supper's ready, I'm full, right? Like I've had all the things. I can't stop this snacking. So how does protein help with the sleep? Because if we have poor sleep, we're skipping our meals, we're fasting, we're go all the time, we're irritable, it's going to be hard to control your nutrition, right? So how does protein help with the sleep and then everything that happens after you wake up, right? Well, we actually need protein. Well, technically we need the broken down form, which is amino acids, to make a lot of our neurotransmitters and hormones. So like estrogen, like progesterone, which we know are very important and we start to struggle with during perimenopause and menopause. And those neurotransmitters and hormones help us with our energy, but also help us with restorative sleep. So if we don't have enough protein in those neurotransmitters and amino acids, it can be a lot harder to build up your progesterone levels. And we know progesterone helps you feel calm and relaxed and grounded. It helps decrease our anxiety, improves our sleep. So if we're not having enough protein and being able to build up those neurotransmitters, it can make sleep a lot more challenging, which leads to that cascading event of craziness, right? So like for myself, for example, I know that if I'm not getting at least 6.5 hours of sleep, like solid sleep where I'm asleep and it's good sleep, I will literally eat anything that I can get my hands on. Like anything. And I used to track this with my Fitbit, and that's how I figured that out. It's like, man, if I don't get at least 6.5 hours of solid sleep, I'm eating at least 500 calories more in a day. That's crazy. So if I'm able to eat more consistently, have enough protein, I am able to sleep so much better, and I'm not having all these issues with energy crashes and cravings and blood sugar control, which makes, again, sticking to your nutrition plan a lot easier. Number 4 is optimizing hormones. So I just alluded to before that protein does help with our hormones, right? This includes estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and insulin actually. And these are all hormones that we tend to struggle with once we start going through perimenopause and the years that follow. And when they're in imbalance with each other, or one's too low, one's too high, or they're all low, right? Or even a couple of them are low, we start to struggle with some pretty terrible side effects, right? This is something that I talk about with women all of the time, where I'm sure you probably are experiencing that too. Maybe we're having hot flashes, trouble sleeping, irritability, brain fog. We're having digestion issues, more bloating, more constipation. Our hair is thinning. Our skin feels like it's crepey, and like the quality of our skin isn't as good, right? These are all things that we start to suffer with. And protein can actually really help. And it helps with the production of these hormones as well. So let's touch on a couple of these quickly here for you. So progesterone, like I mentioned, helps you feel calm and relaxed and just like at ease. It also helps keep our androgens in check. So when androgens are high, that also leads to a ton of other issues, kind of like more PCOS type symptoms. I'm not even going to dive into that because I did a whole podcast on that before. And otherwise this podcast will be way too long for you guys. But some symptoms of low progesterone are heavy bleeding, right? Weight gain or trouble losing weight, mood swings and depression, PMS symptoms, or irregular menstrual cycles, breast tenderness or fibrotic breasts. We start seeing fibroids and gallbladder issues. We have low libido. We have hot flashes. We have migraines and headaches. This is a pretty common one. And then, of course, fluid retention, where it feels like your joints are kind of puffy, and it feels like you're not as toned and tight as you would like to be. Then we have estrogen. If estrogen is not being produced, we know we're going to struggle with our blood sugar control, which is obviously going to have consequences for our ability to lose weight. We're going to struggle with our bone density, increase our risk of fractures. Estrogen also helps us with building muscle and maintaining muscle mass. It helps keep inflammation down. It helps keep our cortisol and stress levels in control. And when it's low, we can start seeing things like dry skin, weak and brittle bones, trouble concentrating, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, depression, tender breasts, vaginal dryness, hot flashes and night sweats, irregular periods or no period at all, weight gain, particularly in the belly and the hips, headaches, decreased sex drive, fatigue and trouble sleeping, insulin resistance and sugar cravings. Like, you can see this is obviously going to make it harder for you to be able to lose weight, right? And then we have testosterone. So this is actually supposed to go up in perimenopause a little bit to compensate for estrogen and progesterone going down. And it plays a huge role in being able to provide us with energy, having a healthy libido. It helps a lot with blood sugar control and maintaining muscle mass. And when it's low, we see our metabolism slows down. So it's a lot easier to gain weight and harder to lose weight. We have low libido. We really struggle with motivation, mood swings, or you find you cry very easily. You have low energy, low muscle mass, or really struggle to put on muscle. And even urinary incontinence, which a lot of people don't realize. And then thyroid health, thyroid function. This is important. This is because, so I'm doing a whole podcast again on thyroid function coming up right away here. I did one like on episode 3 or 4 a long time ago, but I wanted to make a new one. So I'm not going to go too deep into it here. But when we go through perimenopause and menopause, our risk for developing hypothyroidism increases. And when we have a slow functioning thyroid, our metabolism slows down because it really controls how many calories our body burns at rest. So if thyroid function is low, your body gets worse at burning calories. If your body sucks at burning calories, it's going to make weight loss harder. And you're also going to experience symptoms like brain fog, hair loss, constipation, cold hands and feet is a big one. You have a hard time regulating your temperature, mood swings. You find you're just always freaking tired. You struggle to sweat during exercise, high cholesterol, or you start developing a hoarse voice. So I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but protein, also important for thyroid function. Adrenal health. We are so stressed out all of the time. And when estrogen goes down, it doesn't take as much for our stress levels to go up. So what happens internally? So before we would see that, like, you could handle like a 9 out of 10 on the stress scale. You could handle your dog pooping on the floor, your kids making you angry, arguing with your spouse, deadlines at work, dealing with a terrible boss, financial stress, dealing with someone passing, the skipping meals, the low carb, doing a bunch of exercise, not sleeping, fasting, having coffee on an empty stomach. You could handle all of that before. But now you can only handle a 5 out of 10. And then we see that cortisol start to go up. And then what we see is your hormone production goes down. We see our gut health get worse. So we have more bloating, more constipation, more diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome. We have leaky gut, more food intolerances and sensitivities that we never had before. We see our liver health gets worse. We have a harder time detoxifying things from our body. So things accumulate in our body a lot more, making us more sick and lowering our immune function. We see that our blood sugar gets worse and our thyroid function slows down anymore. So we really need to be aware that if we're not getting enough protein and like being able to support our bodies, this can also happen. So if protein helps support our body with hormone production and taking care of, we know that taking care of our thyroid and our adrenals is going to be really, really, really important here. Because if we're not, like, even if we're getting enough protein, like, you have to be aware that the amount of stress that we're putting on our body, like, yes, protein will help. However, we need to be aware that if we're not taking care of our adrenals and our thyroid, you're really going to struggle in this department. So you need to pair that protein, getting enough of that, with de-stressing as well. Those are two huge, huge, huge things that if you're not doing during perimenopause and menopause, you are probably always going to struggle, and getting to your goals is going to be really unrealistic, unfortunately. Have muscle mass. So this is an issue in menopause because when estrogen goes down, again, estrogen, right? She causes so many problems for us when she starts to go down. And then if we pair that with our testosterone levels dropping as well because we're stressed out, we're going to have a really, really hard time building and maintaining muscle mass. And we're going to see that it's harder to build and maintain muscle mass when we're fasting, when we're cutting out our carbohydrates, when we're eating low calorie, when we have imbalanced cortisol levels, if we're not doing proper resistance training. those are all going to work together to actually break down muscle mass and increase your body fat percentage. So a lot of the tactics that we're using to try and get healthy or lose weight actually results in less muscle mass and more body fat. So you have a higher body fat percentage, so you're actually less healthy, which is not good. I did a whole podcast on how to eat to build muscle mass in menopause. I highly recommend you go to that podcast episode. It was very helpful for a lot of women. I got a lot of messages about it, so please go back and read that one. But why do we want to have muscle mass anyways? Well, we want to increase our metabolism. More muscle on your body means your body burns more calories at rest, which means it's a lot easier to lose weight. It improves your insulin sensitivity. We know when estrogen goes down, we struggle with blood sugar control and gaining weight. Having more muscle will help combat that. Muscle is also what makes you look fit. We just did this question in our Facebook or in our client community, asking, send your coach a picture of what you actually want to look like, because they're telling us I want to lose X amount of pounds. I want to be this size. And then they get there and they're like, oh, but I don't look the way I want or the way I thought. And it's because you need more muscle mass on your body, which is going to look different than just trying to lose weight. So being able to understand that is also incredibly important. We know maintaining muscle mass and having enough of it is also going to reduce your risk of falls and fractures, which is huge because when estrogen goes down, our bone density goes down with it. So we have to be even more mindful of maintaining that bone density and being more mobile and being more resilient, and having enough muscle mass goes hand in hand with that. We also know that muscle is an overall indicator of a reduced mortality risk. So the more muscle you have, the lower your mortality risk is. And we know that if you're having surgeries, there's going to be a quicker recovery, shorter hospital stays, and fewer complications in surgery if you have more muscle mass. Those are all huge reasons to make sure that you have enough muscle on your body. If you do not eat enough protein, you cannot build muscle mass. It will not happen. It is the building blocks for muscle, so you need to make sure you're eating enough protein for that. Number 6 is the thermic effect of food. So, did you know that when you eat protein, you burn 20 to 30% of the calories that you consume during the digestion process? So if you're eating 100 grams of protein, you're burning 20 to 30 calories. If you're eating 100 calories of carbs or fat, you're only burning 10 to 15 calories during the digestion process. So this is a very easy way to help facilitate weight loss, is making sure you're having enough of your protein. We also know a reason a lot of women struggle with fat loss is because their metabolism has slowed down. Your body is not good at burning calories. So simply by eating more protein, so example, working your way up from 60 grams a day to 120, which, by the way, you need to do this slowly, right? You don't want to just jump up, otherwise you will be constipated, you will be bloated, you will not feel good, it will not be a good time. So increase slowly. But just by increasing from 60 grams to 120 grams a day, you're going to burn an extra 70 calories just from eating, even if you don't change how many calories you're eating. In a week, that's 500 calories. That's going to add up in the long run, right? I would much rather be able to burn an extra 500 calories a week from just eating food than having to go do something more challenging. Know what I mean? I'm inherently a little bit lazy, I'm going to be honest. So I can burn more calories from eating food. That's probably what I'm going to do, because that sounds like a great time. The next one is disease prevention. So muscle mass is, like I said, a huge indicator of resiliency, lowering your mortality risk. And if we're having enough protein in our diets, it also helps with this stuff. So sarcopenia, that's the disease of losing muscle mass, honestly. So we're at risk of this during perimenopause and menopause. Protein will help counteract that. Osteoporosis, we're at risk of that during perimenopause and menopause. So working out and having protein is going to help you out with that. Obesity, higher protein diet will help with this. Dementia, diabetes, and just lowers your all-case mortality. So making sure you're exercising and that you're having enough protein is going to be huge. And I know that getting enough protein in your diet can be really hard, right? So I am going to list off some of my most helpful tips to help you get there, because it is challenging, right? That's like someone saying, eat less, move more. Super vague advice. I don't even know where to start. Eat more protein. Super vague advice. I don't know where to start. So number 1, Start your day off with a high protein breakfast because protein is very filling. If you are splitting up 120 grams of protein between, let's say, just 2 meals, let's say you're fasting and you're only having lunch and dinner, and then maybe a snack, trying to fit 120 grams of protein in that small of a timeline is very, very challenging. And you're probably going to be relying on non-whole foods, right? You're going to be relying on shakes and powders and things that are a little bit more palatable, like those protein Pop-Tarts and the protein cookies and the protein brownies, right? So if you can add in that breakfast, that helps you split it up, right? So instead of just having 2 meals and a snack, you can have 3 meals and 2 or 3 snacks. It's a lot easier to hit your 120 grams of protein, okay? Number 2, establish what your high protein snacks are. Okay. This is very, very helpful. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself scrambling at the end of the day to try and hit those protein goals. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm already at this time of night. I'm down my protein by 30 grams. What the heck am I going to eat? So sit down and actually figure out what are the snacks that I enjoy that are hopefully mostly whole food based, right? And high in protein. So maybe you're bringing some hard-boiled eggs. Maybe this is some cheese strings. Maybe this is cottage cheese. You're adding cottage cheese to things. Like maybe it's jerky. Maybe it's turkey pepperoni sticks. Things like that. Or you're just making your meal sizes bigger. So like instead of having 2 ounces of chicken, you have 3. Very easy way to increase your protein without feeling like you're constantly having to eat or finding new sources all the time. So figuring out what those are for you is going to be super important. And then having them on hand so that you're not scrambling at the end of the day, right? The next one is drinking it. So this can help you get it in when you are feeling full. However, we want to make sure that you are getting 100 grams a day from whole foods before you start supplementing with other things, because I have lots of friends that have relied on like protein bars and protein powders, and now they're dealing with some pretty aggressive gut health issues. And it's because it really throws off your gut bacteria. There's a lot of artificial sugars and stuff that can really throw things off for people. Some people will be more sensitive to some of the types of protein powders and different additives that they add to those products. So just be very mindful. Try to get most of your protein from whole foods before you start utilizing like the shakes and stuff like that as best as you can. How much do you actually need? Well, you want to take your body weight in pounds, take your body weight in pounds and times that by 0.8. That's going to be the total grams of protein you should be having in a day. Typically, I like to max women out at about 150 grams because it does get challenging to eat that much because protein is so filling. It digests more slowly, right? So that's where I like to put people at. However, track where you are first. This is the most important part. People just go and start changing things. If your intention is to start increasing your protein intake, for example, I highly recommend to track where you are first. Because if you go from, like I said, 60 grams to 100 grams a day, you are going to be bloated. You're likely going to be gassy, constipated. Some people can get diarrhea. It can get pretty not fun. So check out where you are first and then increase by 10-ish, maybe 15 grams each week. So if you have 60 grams this week, next week we're aiming for 75. Then we're going to be aiming for 90 and slowly increasing that way. Because if you jump up too quickly, because it is hard to digest, it can throw your digestion off. So you do need to do this slowly. Just to forewarn you, because I've had people tell me that before. So in the summary here, what I want to cover is, why is protein so important during perimenopause and menopause? Blood sugar control and improving energy, helps keep your cravings at bay, helps improve your sleep, helps with hormone production. It burns more calories during digestion and helps with disease prevention as well. There are so many ways to improve or get that protein in without it being too overwhelming, like figuring out your go-tos, Drink it if you have to. Have more meals, so no more fasting and skipping meals. Otherwise, it's very hard to get that protein in. And also, I have that wonderful 100 gram protein day sample meal plan that you can download. It's in the show notes. If you want it, just message me. I'm happy to send it over to you that way as well. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. I'm always more than happy to help. Thank you for everything. Make sure you share this with the ladies in your community and women who are struggling with this stuff, because I don't think you realize how impactful protein is. And don't forget to check out that podcast on how to eat to build and maintain muscle mass in perimenopause and menopause. Have a great day, you guys. Bye.